Ang programang ito ay rated SPG. Striktong patnubay at gabay na magulang ang kailangan. Maaari may masemang tema, lingwahe, karakasan, sexual, horror at droga na hindi angkop para sa mga batang manonood. Para sa mga batang
Sa bawat kusuot, may makukurawan. Maduduwa. Mayong buntag mga kusuot. Sa sining, tama na muna ang pagiging budi. Sa dami ng nagagandahang likang obra na nakikita ngayon, alam nyo ba na ang samot-saring kulay na ginamit sa mga ito ay hindi lamang pinili at isinaayos basta-basta ng mga pintor? Ito ay pinag-iisipan, may rason, at may ideolohiyang sinusunod upang tunay na bigyang buhay at damdamin ang mensaheng nais ipahatid ng isang obra maestra. Mula sa banayad na asul na kulay ng kalangitan hanggang sa matamis na pulang labi ng iyong sinusinta. Ang kulay ay may mga naiibang mga katangian na siyang nagbibigay ng iba't ibang impresyon sa ating mga kaisipan.
This is Kevin McCain with Kevin McCain Studios, and today we're going to be talking about the three characteristics of color. And if we look down here, I've got these three bands. We've got this fourth one down here, but I'll explain that in a moment. So, with color, it has three basic characteristics. You have a color's value, how dark or how light that color is, plus you have a color's saturation, how bright or how dull that color is. So this is a red as it moves down, dropping duller and duller and duller, less intense, until it's at an indistinguishable gray. So we have our dark to light as our value. We also have our intensity, or what some people say chroma. They mean the same thing. That's how bright or how dull that color is. And then you have hue, and hue is just which family does that color belong to? Is it part of the yellow family, the orange, the red, violet, blue, or green? So the three characteristics of color, once again, are your value, your intensity, and your hue, again, your color families. This last one shows again our color families, and it shows a gray stripe. This just shows how gray can shift depending on what color it is placed next to. So this really has, we can just kind of ignore that. I'm just explaining why it's here. But so the three characteristics are our value, our intensity, and our hue. This has been Kevin McCain with Kevin McCain Studios. Find out more about my painting workshops, find out more about my artwork, check out the illustrations I've done over my career at kevinmccainstudios.com. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Magandang araw mga kinusok. Ay mali, Kim Kosokot pala. Ngayon nandito tayo sa nagbabahagang hangin ng Batangas State University at magtatanong ng mga kineming colors na yan. Tara, let's go na! How does color relate? Diba?
So, color harmony is one of the methods.
Harmony.
Establishing color quantity.
Quantity.
Quality.
Quality.
Quality. In a composition.
In a composition.
So, may apat tayong methods.
Four methods. I see.
Four methods. So,
What are those four methods?
So, yung una nga kasi, wag mo kasi ang pangunahan.
Sorry.
So, yung una, meron tayong monochromic harmony. Monochromic harmony. So, yun yung kapag isang color lang yung nasa composition.
Kasi mono, di ba?
Oo, monochromic. Tapos, siya yung para bang adding ng white and black. Tapos, meron tayong, yung second natin is complementary harmony.
Complementary.
Siya naman yung kapag,
Interesting.
di ba, ang monochromic, isa lang siya.
Ang complementary,
So,
parang may
dalawa.
combination. May combination.
Dalawa na siya.
Ang galing.
Dalawang color.
God.
The third one is
So yung third is analogous harmony.
analog. Parang magkatugma pa.
Hindi, ano siya, yung adjacent or besides, adjacent ng sa color wheel.
Color wheel.
Oo. Tapos, yung last naman is yung color temperature.
Color temperature. So, ang una natin is monochromatic.
Oo,
The
monochromatic.
second one is complementary.
Mm-mm.
The third one is analogous.
Analogous harmony. Then
Tas
yung
yung
last
third,
is color temperature.
color temperature.
Yung color temperature,
Ano ba talaga yun?
ano siya, it refers to yung warmth or yung
Yung init, no?
oo, or yung opposite nun, which
Opposite
is
na.
yung
Cold.
yung
Kasi cold ako.
yung warm is syempre meron tayo nung sa yellow, and then yung sa coolness or yung opposite nga is yung sa blue. Yun yung color temperature.
Color temperatures.
Oh, yung parang giniginaw ka na gano'n. Di ba kapag giniginaw ka na blue, yung yung inaano mo.
Temperature, no? Nakikita ko yan sa settings eh, temperature pag
Oo,
nag-edit
kapag
ako.
nag-edit. Ganun.
Yung pala yun. Kasi wala, pag ina-adjust ko yung titingnan, ito mukhang maganda to, ganun.
Oo.
May ganun pala, yun pala ibig sabihin.
Oo, yun yung sa
Kala ko may
temperature.
malagay lang yung mga programmer dun na settings, parang ganito.
Hindi, try mo lang magkalikot.
Sige. Thank you.
Ayun lang yun.
So, 4 yun. Meron tayong monochromatic, which is yung isa lang. Tapos yung pangalawa, complementary kung saan yung dalawang kulay magkatugma. Tapos yung pangatlo
Tama.
is analogous.
Oo, tama.
Ano ulit ang analogous?
Ang analogous is yung adjacent.
Adjacent color sa color
Oo,
wheel.
sa color wheel.
Yan siguro yung mga techniques sa tips sa mga fine art, sa mga artist.
Oo, sa
paano
mga
gumawa ng
art, painters.
Pangarap ko rin nung bata ako maging artist. Siguro dapat naintindihan ko na yan. Tapos yung pang-apat is
Yung color temperature.
Color temperatures.
Tandaan mo yun.
O tapos na pagtanungan na natin mga estudyante dito sa BSU, grabe, nakaka-hype talaga guys, di ba? No wonder National State University ito. Kapag tanong, hindi lang talaga sila brainy ko, hindi. Yung mga itsura pa guys, kinikilig ako. Gagala muna ako dito sa school. Back to you mga baby.
Oops! Tulog na ba kayo? Pwes, huwag munang matutulog. Nagbabalik na ang nag-iisang Kimi Round para sa not part 1, but part 2 ng Titigan Mo o PAK. Ngayon, para tunay ng mabuhay ang inyong mga diwa, ako magpapakita muli ng mga kahindik-hindik este-este, kagilagilalas na litrato ng mga pamosong estatwa. Excited na ba kayo? Comment down below! Sana nag-enjoy kayo sa mga kahindik-hindik na litrato na ipinakita ko sa inyo. At muli, nandito si Kimi Ron, ang nag-iisang Kimi Ron ng Titigan Mo o PAK. Annyeong!
Sumasakit na ba ang ulo mo dahil sa dami ng iyong gawain? O nangangati ka na ba dahil sa di matuloy na outing? Ayos lang yan dahil sagot na namin ang kaligayahan nyo habang ikay nauumay sa bahay. Handog namin ng Team Kusukot sa inyo ang ilang palabas na siyang pupukaw sa inyong mga puso't isipan. For only $9.99. Ano pang hinihintay nyo? Feast your eyes with titles like Nasaan ang Order Ko? Jessa Densa. A Not So Happy Birthday. Not So Little Yellow Riding Hood. Akin lang si Earl. Denzel After Dark. At crush ako ni Denzel noong first sem.
So, crush mo ako dati?
Oo.
Kaya kumuha ka na ng makakayakap at manood na ng takilang magpapasakit ng inyong tiyak.
Babangungutan ako nito mga. Salamat mga baby! Since buwan naman ang wika, atin na rin siya sa atin ng mga elemento ng sining na texture, space at movement na pwede na rin magawa sa pamamagitan ng masining na paggamit ng kulay. Let's go, go, go mga kasukot!
Texture is the look or feel of a surface. Just like form, texture can be real or implied. If you were to run your hand across this sculpture by Alberto Giacometti, you would feel the hardness of the bronze metal and the roughness of the form that Giacometti created. This is called actual texture. Implied textures are only visual, they can't be felt. For instance, if you could touch the canvas of this self-portrait by Chuck Close, you wouldn't feel the varied textures of skin and hair. You would feel the smoothness of the oil paint. So these textures are implied because we can only see them. There are countless ways that artists create implied textures. How many different kinds of lines do you notice in this painting by Roy DeForest? You have the zigzag lines creating the woman's hair on the left, cross-hatching creating her skin, the blurred, smudged colors coming out of the dog's mouth and the man's mouth in the center. Those are just to name a few kinds of implied textures here. Textures can also be created through use of shapes. In this painting by Gustav Klimt, notice how he repeats shapes to create textures. You have the triangles and lines on the woman's dress on the left, the many spirals creating the tree in the center, and in the woman's dress on the right you have circles within circles, rectangles within squares, and all the scattered shapes throughout the piece create many different textures. Paintings and other typically two-dimensional art can have actual texture. Sometimes artists layer paint on the canvas so thick that it becomes three-dimensional. At that point, the paint is a sculptural element that can be manipulated and shaped. Some artists build up fabrics, textiles, jewelry, and many other objects on the canvas to create additional textures. Artists often feature the natural textures of the materials they use, or textures uniquely created and formed by hand. Whatever the approach, textures are an expressive tool artists use to reinforce their overall messages. The next time you're making a painting, drawing, collage, or sculpture, find a way to incorporate textures that say something relevant and important to you. Space is the area in which an artwork is organized. It encompasses the area within a work of art and can also include the area immediately outside of and around a work of art. In paintings, drawings, and other two-dimensional work, the space of an artwork is usually contained within the borders of the paper or canvas it's made on. The main objects in a work of art take up positive space. The area around them then is called negative space. Sometimes artists intentionally try to blur the boundaries between positive and negative space. In sculpture and other three-dimensional arts, positive space is the area the objects actually occupy, and negative space is all the other areas between and around the objects. Many two-dimensional works create the illusion of three-dimensional space by using some very specific techniques. Notice how painter Kehinde Wiley overlaps some of the background pattern onto the front of people in these portraits. This overlapping gives a sense of three-dimensional space. Landscape painter Wang Hui placed objects in different parts of the canvas to imply three-dimensional space. Notice how figures towards the top of the paintings seem to be moving further back in space, even though they are roughly the same size. Some artists do use relative size to give their work the illusion of real space. The smaller human figures in these paintings by Ben Shahn seem to be more distant and further away from the larger ones. Roy de Carava often contrasted sharply focused figures with blurry, soft backgrounds in his photographs. Such a contrast in detail gives the sense of lush, real depth. Varying hues and values will also give two-dimensional works the illusion of real space. See how painter Georgia O'Keeffe uses a variety of red values and imbues her work with a feeling of true depth? Painter Alex Roulette uses classic single and two-point perspective in his work to create the impression of deep, expansive space. Notice too how objects get smaller in order to seem more distant from each other. Some other ways to describe how artists use space are dense, open, cluttered, symmetrical, shallow, flat. How would you describe the way artists approach space in these works? What qualities do you see? How artists use space is one way they are able to create a unique style and reinforce the messages they hope to communicate. The next time you're looking at a painting, photograph, or sculpture, try to notice how the artist is using space in their work. And when you're making your own artwork, try to develop an approach to space that resonates with other ideas you're trying to communicate. That way, your messages will surely travel far and wide.
When we talk about movement, we are talking about how artists use elements to direct the eye around a composition. The elements we're mostly going to review in this process are shapes, lines, colors, and forms. But it's not just about moving around a work of art. It's also seeing motion or suggested motion. And frankly, many artists today also create artwork that physically moves. The first piece we're going to look at is Sunlight on the Coast by Winslow Homer. This painting is great for discussing an implied movement. Homer is undoubtedly getting us to feel the waves, to feel this rough Maine seascape, and he's doing this primarily through the use of lines and color. Here we see these sharply painted diagonal lines. We see them in waves and also in these rocks. Notice the way they are jutting out of the water. We also see curved diagonals, and this is all contrasted against steep vertical pitches, until finally we get over to the far left corner where it is a kaleidoscope of diagonals, verticals, horizontals, all adding up to create this turbulent feel. But it isn't just the lines of the waves that are helping create the sense of movement in the painting. We also have the stark contrast between the foreground, here which contains an intense white to mimic the frothiness of the ocean waves, in comparison to the stark black background. Look how the horizon line is blurred between the ocean and the sky. So Homer has created this dark background, and he's used it to contrast against the intense, bright foreground, emphasizing the chaotic movement of the waves. All right, next we'll talk about the physical movement in art today. Here we have a kinetic sculpture by George Rickey, Triple N Gyratory 3. Rickey dedicated his career to investigating the poetic possibilities of movement. In his words, he's using control of weight and balance, and also time, which he sees as comparable to how a painter would use color and form, or how a musician would use sound to express themselves. Again, you can see the way these ends are pivoting on each other, the way that the wind is rotating them around the space. So Ricky has moved beyond the illusion of movement to include active motion as a new element of his work. And lastly, let's take a look at this painting, The Feast of King Herod, a 17th century oil painting by Matteo Preti. There isn't the illusion of movement like in the Homer painting, or actual movement like in Ricky's sculpture, but rather this painting demonstrates the way a skillful artist can move our eye around a composition. The focal point of this painting is King Herod's stepdaughter, Salome, as she's serving up a platter of John the Baptist's head. According to the story, taken from the New Testament, Salome has requested the saint's head as a reward for dancing for the king. To emphasize her role in the story, the artist is highlighting Salome. She stands out because of her porcelain-like white skin. We can see the way the eyes of all the other figures are angled toward her, including her mother's eyes. Herod himself is gazing straight at Salome, and we can see the way their eyes seem to meet. There are other elements that help direct our eye around the painting. Notice the way this steep pitch directs us down. We have these stacked steps, and we have the urns on the steps, and they're all leading us down to this point. So the painting is pushing us to the lower left-hand portion. But you can see the artist doesn't trap us in the corner. He helps us move around the painting. Look at the drapes and the way they pitch themselves back out from where Herod is, creating the suggestion of a triangle. And this triangle helps us move through the painting. So it's not just about looking at Salome and the head of John the Baptist, but it's also about how our eye is moving around the painting. As we have just seen by looking at three very different works of art, movement is the principle of design that embodies action in art, whether that action is implied, real, directive, or kinetic.
Naway sana'y may natutunan kayo mga beshi at sana makasama namin ulit kayo sa future mga peeps. Kami ulit ang Team Kusokot na may sinasabing, pag may kusokot, may masasabing, may matutulong!